Oh, very good. We finished the day earlier, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Okay, we're going to continue. Again, it's going to be a small class because a lot of people are just coming out of Yom Tif, but I figured why not. Hold on, let me bring up the page. Okay, so we are holding Sif Lacha Zayin 7. It says like this: the Chotzer Oybayish Sheptuchim L'Toich HaRachoyv. If you have a courtyard or a house opens to the street, Vadels Niftach Lifnim, and the door opens inward. So you're pulling open your door in your house, which most houses are. Vamezuzos im hamashkev sha'al gabeyem. So therefore, he says the mezuzos and their doorposts that are above, vaskufo shebetachtis, and the door floor, hein litzad rechov, they go into the street. So that everything is projected outwards to the street, like we have in most houses. It's not so clear, and this is a lot of the questions. Again, if someone doesn't have an Erev in the front of the house and the paper gets thrown right outside the door, if you could bring it inside. So he says that sometimes it's considered the Rosh Yachid, and sometimes it's considered a Carmelis. It's obviously not Rosh Rabban because you need a lot of people. Hey, Aaron, welcome back to the classes. So we're holding law 7. So again, we're talking about yes, Rebecca.
I thought the reason you can't bring in the paper is because it came from outside of the tchum on Shabbos.
Yeah,
No?
so you have that, and then the idea that it's not content to be read on Shabbos, etc. I'm saying one of the other questions is if first of all, it's not necessarily 100% sure it came out of the Tchum. Tchum is the Tchum of Shabbos in Seattle or New York. The printing presses, I'm probably there. You know,
But
so the
like my parents live in like Westchester, which is a suburb of New York, and the paper was probably printed in Manhattan. So that is outside the tchum from Westchester.
Again, I'm not sure the makeup of Westchester. You have to remember something else, that a tchum doesn't stop being a tchum, and unless there's no one living in between. So I'm not sure if from Westchester, again, not familiar with it, but I'm not sure if from Westchester to New York, wherever the printing would be, is considered like, if there's open plains that doesn't have within the limits of the halacha someone living there. As soon as someone's living there, though it's different neighborhoods, zip codes, could be different counties, but it's not considered out of the tchum.
Oh, okay.
What's a tomb?
The tchum we spoke about is the amount of whether it's 2,000 feet, whatever is the space that no one lives outside of the city. So if let's say you live in a city, like I don't know, a city that's surrounded by fields and forests. So once you reach a certain, you can't go past a certain point. You can't even walk past such a point. It's not about carrying. You're not allowed to leave your space on Shabbos. So the definition of your space, the Torah gives you up to, I forget the exact amount in feet, but it's you have up to 2,000 amas that you could walk. Let's say 3,000 feet outside, but it's not just outside of your house. It's outside of the residential area. And what defines a residential area is not so simple. It's not like it's outside city limits, because, for instance, you'll be driving in Seattle, and then you'll be on a very busy street on Lake City Way. It's going to say this is the city limits to Seattle, and from here on it starts the next city, Bothell, what have you. And for instance, the Seattle police won't ticket you past the city line, right? 'Cause it's not their line. But as far as the view goes, it's all the same. The store could be half here, half there. So it's not the city line. It's from where people reside. And even one person residing within the 2,000 feet could extend the borders. So if you have a place like Westchester, I'm not sure if there's an empty space between
But what if you have to cross the Hudson River to get
oh,
from
that's like a problem. There's a big shiloh about crossing from Brooklyn to Manhattan, because the bridges are I mean, the space of between Manhattan to, let's say, Brooklyn is the space of the 2,000
Oh, but
amas.
I know a lot of people, and now we may not be right, but they'll walk to Manhattan from Brooklyn.
Yes. And I've done it as well. I've walked it in Talucha. We've walked it. So I believe there's different there's questions about it. There's questions about the tchum being out of about it being out of the tchum as far as because the cars are driving there, and there's a lot of this question. It's a question that's addressed. I think we got into it a little bit last time earlier in the laws of Shabbos about going to, let's say, like you were talking about going to walking to go to a game or a concert and getting closer by. So there is the question, and I know the question's addressed in Brooklyn. We spoke about it, I have to remind myself of why they said you could walk the bridge. But in Westchester, if it has the bridge, it would be the similar question. But here, this is not the question we're talking about over here. Here we're talking about the question is that you have a yard or you have your house that the door opens inward. If the door would open outward, so that kind of buys space for the house because it's part of the house because the door is opening outwards. But here we're saying the door is opening inwards. So you're like your house door opens inward, which most houses do, right? You don't open the door outwards. So in a house. So if you open inwards, and then you have the doorpost and the what do they call the mashkof in English? It's called the space in front of the door. Is sometimes considered a private domain, sometimes it's considered a carmelist. And then the question is if you could bring it from there into your house, if something's outside. So that's what I was saying about the paper. Even if the paper were to be coming from the tchum, to bring it into your house, into a Rishus HaYachid, which is your house, and if your doorpost or the space in front of your door is considered a carmelist already, so then you can't bring it in, you're changing domains.
But what about if it's a porch?
Oh, that's another thing. So, for instance, you have my mother's house, for instance, in Seattle. So the space before the door is 3 steps up, and it's its own. So it's already 10 tefachim high. And then we spoke that even 10 tefachim in a carmel is considered. If you're out of the space, so then it's considered a rishus yachid. So then it would be that would be a different situation. But if you have just literally a door that opens on the floor to the outside. So again, it depends how we view a front yard.
So let me just ask you this. So you're saying is forget about the front yard, all that. Just saying your house and the outside is the outside, and you can't carry. You're saying you get wherever the door ends up, you get all the way to the door, end of the door.
No, well, so if the door goes inwards, it doesn't add anything. If the door opens outwards, no, I don't believe any houses do that. They don't make it that way. That's not how people do houses. But if the door were to open outward, so that kind of would because basically the people in the street know that that's your space because you open whenever you want. You don't have to take permission to open your door, right? So that's why we don't have doors that open outward. It's not a regular thing to open the door outwards. You hit someone. But in theory, if you did open outwards, then it would buy you space. But if it's opening inwards, so then it's considered outside, and you can't bring it from outside to inside.
I have 2 doors. So the first door is a screen with a little handle. It doesn't, it's just so that it can leave the door open as it goes inwards to let air in. Then another door goes out. Would that count as a full door?
That's a good question. You mean the screen door going outward?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I have to check. But here, what he says is like this. This is what he says. He says is, sometimes this place is a private domain, sometimes it's considered a carmelist. So that's what he says. Because we're not experts in this, not everyone is experts. Therefore, we give it both stringent. It's strict in both cases. Meaning, if you're standing on the outside and you want to put something under someone's doorpost, that's not allowed because maybe it's a rishus yachid. And if you're standing out inside, you want to bring something in, it's not allowed because maybe it's a carmelist. So therefore, he says no one should really use that space. Rebecca, your hand is up. Yeah, you want to ask a second question?
No, sorry.
No problem. Therefore, he says, we give it we give it both the status of a private domain and a carmelist. Again, a carmelist domain is like a public domain, just not as severe, not as populated, but still you're not allowed to bring it from a carmelist into a rishus hayachid.
Let me ask you this. Domain. You don't ask any questions. You did nothing. You have a mail slot and the mailman comes. It's Shabbos because he delivers on Saturday in the United States, and they shove mail through the mail slot. Can you pick it up on Shabbos?
Again, there's the question. There's the question of the male being muksa for other reasons. For instance, there you have the case where Rebecca pointed out could be it's coming from out of the tchum in that case because of male does come from outside. But again, most male that's delivered is already arrives the earlier before. But then, but if you take away the problem of muksa and take away the problem of all that. So and the Gentile or the mailman delivers it and falls on the floor, then it's different than if it would be put outside your house and you bring it inside. Yes.
No, they came in your house and it's
I know,
junk
I know, I
mail
know, I
and
know, I
bills.
know. Okay, yeah, I'm saying so again. So it's if there's a question of muksa things that are not supposed to touch on Shabbos, and it's a question of where if it comes from outside the tchum. But as far as the question is of something that's in the private domain or public domain, that's not a problem because it's been deposited into the private domain.
Okay,
Not
thank
by
you.
you. Then he got this. Therefore, he says, we give it both this the rule, the classification of a private domain and a carmelis, and therefore you can't bring from there to the street, because then it's a public domain, or carmelis, or if it's a carmelis out in the street, and you can't bring from the street to there because maybe it's a private domain. And also, so both if you're if you're in the public domain, you can't place something by someone's door because then you're putting it into another domain possibly. You can't take from there if it's already positioned and remove it to the public domain or the karmas because maybe it's a rishus yachid. And then from there, and from the perspective of the outside and the inside, you can't take in because maybe it's a private domain, a public domain, and you can't place there because maybe it's a public domain. It means you can't open your door and place something outside your door because maybe you're placing something in a public domain / carmelis. Okay, so he says, "Kishemahu carmelis v'chein im pasach no'ul utzrichen lifaytzchay." So now here's the question. The question comes, this is a question that could happen all the time. If the door is closed and you want to open it, when you open it, how does it open? It swings inward, right? It swings into the house. If the question would be, if you put your key in, let's say you leave a key under the mat and you open the door and you put the key in and right away it opens up inwards. So now you just transfer the key from a public domain to private domain, and therefore he says, therefore it's not permitted. Now we could open the doors, unlock it, and take out the key, and it's never entered the house. That's different. But here we're talking about if he enters the house. So therefore he says, if the door is closed, and you have to open it with the key. The Gentile has to put the key into the door. You can't put it in. Once it's open, the lock, before you open the door, the Gentile should take out the key. Because the Jew opens the door, while the key's in the door, he's possibly bringing something in from public domain to private domain. Possibly. If the under the doorpost is already public domain, or the carmelis, let's call it, and you put the key in, now you open the door. So then the key enters in, you brought the key in. So here, but it seems to say what he's saying over here is, and I want to see the footnotes, it seems to say is that the Gentile should put the key in, take it out before the door opens. It means you shouldn't even put it in and unlock the door. But let's see the footnotes on this. He says, because seemingly if you pick up the key and you put it in the door, or if you have it, sometimes we have the Shabbos key, meaning the key that's on your person, right? There's a way to keep the key on your person when you have it as part of a belt. So that's when we were growing up as Bachrim in New York. So in America, it's less common. In Seattle, it's less common, let's say, to have, we don't lock the door so much. Like they're not upset, in New York where you grew up, you're obsessed with locking the doors the whole time. In Seattle, it's not so, it's just a crazy concept that the door should be unlocked. But in New York, if you live in an apartment building, you need a key. And so what we had is that you have a bendel. A bendel is by Chabad and some Chassidim, we wear like a gartel underneath our shirts. And that's like a rubber band with like little hooks that hook together to make it like a belt, which would be like a gartel. So you're always having a gartel on you. Idea of a gartel is separating your upper and lower body. Hold on, Aaron. Hold on. Let me finish. And therefore, and so what we do is, so what you do is that we would the keys, the old metal keys would be drilled on each side of the key, and the hooks would go into the key as opposed to going into each other. And then you had the key as part of the belt. If you would not make the holes on the side of the key and just put the hooks on the little place where the key, where the ring goes of the key ring goes, so then the key is not part of the belt and it's just hanging off the belt. That's not allowed. But if it's on the sides, it becomes part of the belt. So, but then the question is, if you have the key on your person and you open the door and you put it back in, it seems that's what we always used to do. And here he says that the Gentiles should put the key in and take it out even before you open the door. Yes, Aaron.
I know people make tie clips out of it.
What do you mean? As a key?
The key is the tie clip, or they put it on top of a tie clip that is made to hold a key.
Okay. The tie clip, because he's saying, anyways, they have a tie clip and they use it as a key.
The tie clip the key is on the tie clip, or it looks like it, whatever, it holds your tie in place.
Okay. I'm saying the thing is that the key has to be part of whatever it's being used for. If the key is just separate from the tie clip,
they don't use the key except as a tie clip. They never can take the key off.
Okay, that's something else. So here he says like this.
But my question is this: if you're supposed to have I know I live in an apartment and I'm lucky I got doormen, so they watch the doors, so usually they keep it open, whatever. So you don't need a key technically. Except when you want to go to your apartment in the hallways. My question is that if you live in a house, you don't have goys standing around waiting for you to come home. So how are you going to get in?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, let's just see the footnotes here because he explains what the Kitzur is talking about. Today, the keys are not like, most keys are not like we used to be. It used to be the keyhole actually went through and through the door. So when you put the key into the keyhole, you're actually putting it into almost into the private domain. So then by putting the key in, it's a problem. That's the problem. The problem is it's not the unlocking it, but when you put the key in, you're putting it from a public domain to private, possibly a public domain to private domain. Therefore, the Gentiles have to put it in and take it out because otherwise it's a problem. But he says in the keyhole does not go, he goes, if the keyhole does not go through to the private domain, which most today the keys don't, right? They just go into the door. And it's higher than 10 tefachim, which most doors, that's where the key is higher than 10 tefachim, right? It's on the doors. It's 10 tefachim is about, let's say, 3 feet. Okay, most keys is about that height and higher. So then it's a makom patur. It's an open domain, meaning it's a place that we said that's permissible to move from a private or public domain into the makom patur, which is above 10 tefachim. And you may insert the key according to the Shulchan Aruch, according to the Alter Rebbe. So according to the Alter Rebbe, which is basically makes it possible for people to use their key. Again, in Seattle, it's less common, but in New York, this was a problem. There's still a problem in Brooklyn, where the doors are literally on the street, right?
Yes.
The doors are literally on the street. There's no such thing as a front space. There's no public space. So this is Brooklyn, right? And you put the key in. So if the key would go through and through, you can't put the key in. Because then you're putting it possibly from a public domain into a private domain. But today he says, because the keys are not like that, the keys are just like go a little bit into the lock, and the lock is above 10 tefachim. So then the Alter Rebbe says it's not a problem. So therefore, there's still a problem to open the door and bring it in, possibly. Even that much driving wouldn't be a problem if it's makom patur. I'm wondering about that. But then you bring it from a makom patur to a shusa yachid. I guess it would possibly be allowed also. But either way, what we do is then we take the key out before and we keep it on our person.
Okay. A lot of people in Brooklyn just get the number pads that are manual.
Yes, okay, that's today, but you have to remember that's only past 10 or 15 years that was an option.
Yeah, true.
Okay, now he continues. B'harbe makomos, in many places, yesh batim asher gag nimshach min hakoisel habayis l'toich harachoiv. V'nismach sham amudim. Okay, what about a proper doorpost where the door, with the so to say, your ceiling goes out a bit over the house, and then there's the doorposts that are like a nice house in the south, right? So there's the doorposts that are, let's say, a few feet away from the wall, and it holds the extension. So there's so the rain doesn't, a person could dry off, etc. So the roof continues past the door or past the wall into the street, and standing on beams. That space doesn't become a private domain. So you cannot bring from the house to that space, even though it's covered by the roof, and you can't bring from that space into the house. And also, it's a public domain. The fact that the roof goes over it doesn't nullify its public domain, because you just have the roof that goes into it, but it's still public space. Anyone can walk there. And therefore, you can't carry there either more than 4 armlets. Because that space under the roof that extends outside past the wall of the door is still public or a karmelis.
So even in a shul, because my shul has that.
Again, it depends what your shul mashavi has an eruv further out.
Oh yeah, my shul has a whole eruv, but if it was on a shul, it would be the same as a private house.
If there was no eruv at all, and it was just, then that would be a problem. Yeah. Even though there's beams, so kind of why isn't the beam squaring off that space? The Havitzuris Pesach, the Dinakich Mechitza, we said in last week's class that when you have the Tzuris HaPesach, if you have the frame of a door, that should be like extending. It should be like extending the house. There's no sides. It means in order to have a Tzuris HaPesach, which we learned about last week, which is that if you have 2 walls, if the walls, let's say the door is on the south side. So if you have walls that extended from the east and the west, and then there is beams at the end of that, and the roof hung on that, then you're right, then it's a private domain. You have a Tzuris HaPesach. But here you have no space on the east and the west. So the fact that the beams go out, that doesn't you can't just make a door frame without walls, like we learned last week. And it has to be at least a certain amount of space away from the wall. And it's not, it's further out. So if it's further out, then those beams don't count for anything. The roof doesn't close up the space. And therefore that space is open, and therefore it's public domain. You can't carry in it more than 4 amos, and you can't move from there into the house because it's a public domain. So he says, from the west to the east, in the same example given, there's no mechitza, there's no walls. So what do we do? There's a way to fix the problem. If you put a little kana, a little beam. We say kana is a stick. If you put a stick against the wall, exactly against the beam, so that makes that now there's a Tzuris HaPesach on the west and the east, and then it's all locked in. Then it's not a problem. So therefore, he says because there's not a breach of 10 amos. So then, so the way to fix it would be, Aaron, in your shul's case, if there wasn't a mechitza, they would have a little stick on the wall outside the door against the beam, and then that locks in the beam to the stick to make it a doorpost, and then you have a doorpost, and it privatizes that space. This was based on the class you didn't come to last week. So he says, so you do that on the west and the east side. You put a stick, and now the stick basically is matching with the beam, and then there's the roof. So between the stick, the beam, and the roof becomes a doorpost, and then that locks in the space. And that's how we basically make an eruv. That's what they're basically doing by putting the stick on the outside of the wall is making an eruv on that space. What happens if we have what do they call them when the houses are together? If the houses are together, like again in Brooklyn, New York, all the houses go one to the next, right?
They're just called connected. I mean, when they're not connected, they say separate.
Disconnected houses, yeah. So adjacent to each other, right? So So then when he says, let's say, again, if you walk in Brooklyn, I'm just thinking Crown Heights, you could go down Empire Street and they have houses, not apartment buildings, even houses that are just totally connected, one, two, three. It's literally one building from the beginning of the street to the end. So then let's say the roof goes out over all the houses, right? So you have all the houses and you have the beams in front. So all the houses have this extra protected space, but there's a ram you can't carry. So you don't have to put a stick outside each person's house. That's not necessary. Even though, let's say there's a beam 5 feet or 4 feet outside each person's house. So let's say you have 5 houses together, and you have a beam at the end, the right on the southern, on the eastern side, and a beam on the western side, and then outside each house you have another beam to support the roof. The roof can't just stand on 2 beams, right? So you won't have to put a stick against each beam. You could just put those little sticks against the most western or most eastern side, and that locks up the entire space by under the doors or by the doors, and now that whole place becomes a private domain. But then you have to be careful to make an Erev Chatzeros, which would allow for the community to use a private domain, which we learned about. Even if you're in a private domain, but it's communal space that everyone's apartment goes into, like the Chatzar or the Mavoi. So then you have to make a Erev Chatzeros, which the Erev unifies all the community to have like a single relationship with that space, and therefore everyone could carry into the space. But if you don't make an Erev Chatzeros, then it's not a problem of it being a public or private or a Carmelist, but it's a problem of a community using a private space.
And how do you do that? And the second question is what I mean in Borough Park. I know a guy, and some of the houses are owned by Chinese people, but there might be 2 or 3 or 4 in the middle that are Jewish. So what do you do then?
Okay, excellent. These are both 2 excellent questions. Number one is that's a general question, not just about the apartments, but this would really kind of in an apartment building, not everyone's Jewish, right? But let's even say, well, the scenario you're giving in our case here, where we have houses that are connected, and we have the roof goes over, and we have the beams that support the outside of the roof, and we want to carry under the roof, so we have to put these sticks. And he says it's not necessary to put the sticks outside your private house. You could put the sticks outside the entire line of houses. Number one is, and then you have to make an Erev Chatzeros. In the case where there's Gentiles, so we're going to learn the laws of Erev Chatzeros. How does it work when there's Gentiles who belong to a group of houses? And how, if their space, if their ownership of their right to that space disrupts the communal space. So that we'll learn about the laws of Erev Chatzeros. And again, how we do an Erev Chatzeros is it's actually you have to put food together, and what basically is that you use the food to create a community space, just like it's like making a communal kitchen. So although you're not going to sit outside that space and eat, but the food is a way to establish a community, and so therefore the food creates the communal space. Again, I have to remind myself the question of the Gentiles happens all the time. Usually they either ask the Gentile to nullify his space, or there's some sort of process to do it. Or if in an extreme case, you could always just put the stick outside your house. It means he's saying you don't have to put the stick outside your house. You can if you want to. If the community doesn't want to make an Erev Chatzeros and doesn't want to make a community out of it, so no one's stopping you from privatizing your space. It becomes problematic a bit because then it kind of disconnects from the other people. And if you're not part of the community, then you disrupt everyone else's ability to have a communal space.
I know. I'm just saying on Sukkot, I know people don't hold by the Eruv, and one of them is my rabbi's. He's my friend, and he's a rabbi, and he said they give challah because they don't own it; they rent from the house, and so they give challah to the owner, so that they can carry to the sukkah.
It's making an Erev Chatzeros. I mean, a sukkah. The word is the sukkah itself is an Erev Chatzeros. That's the whole story. The Rebbe's father, that by being part of a sukkah, that is the communal space. But
each one had their own sukkah.
Yeah. Oh, their own sukkah. Okay, I see. Okay, so here we have number 17. It says, is considered as the street whether it's a public domain or a Carmelist. So he says 17. It's not like a public domain for it has a roof over it. So it's not exactly public. You can't fly an airplane over it. I mean, in it. but it's a karmelis, and you may not carry into and from to a private domain, says the Chayei. So the Chayei Adam says it's never a public domain because the roof basically disqualifies it from public domain, but it's still a karmelis. It means it's open space for anyone to use. But if the width of the overhang is less than 4 tefachim, it's a very small overhang, it is not a karmelis according to the Mishnah Berurah. So Mishnah Berurah says it has to be more than 4 tefachim, which is about, let's say, a foot, a little over a foot. If the overhang is less than a foot, then it's an extension of the house, and it's not a karmelis, and therefore you could carry in it. So that goes to answer your question also, Aaron. What do people do? A lot of people have overhang of the roof, and a lot of the times it's not more than 4 tefachim. So that kind of private, then that changes the whole dynamic of the doorpost. But the difference is of bringing into the door. But it doesn't say, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't say that it has to have the beam. I'm not sure if the beam is in this case necessary. Means when the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch opens up and says there's a beam, he's telling us that don't think the beam privatizes the space. You need to have a stick opposite the beam to create a Turas HaPesach, a door space. But what happens if, according to the Mishnah Berurah, we just said in 17, where this is most houses. Most houses, the roof will go about a foot over the door. No one has this straight. I mean, again, in New York, it's different. But in Seattle, where you have kind of A-frames, the door will go, the roof goes over a little bit. So when you could stand by your door, you don't have to bring the rain into the house. So then, according to the Mishnah Berurah, if that's not more than 4 tefachim, so that privatizes that space. And it's mashma from what he's saying. It seems from what he's saying that you don't need the doorpost. The doorpost is only kind of the doorpost didn't help in the first place. And when does the doorpost help? Only if you put a stick opposite it. But if you don't have a doorpost, I'm not clear. I have to check. It doesn't say here clearly if the Mishnah Berurah is talking about a case where there is a doorpost or not a doorpost. But he seems to say that the overhang, if I'm reading the English right, but if the width of the overhang is less than 4 tefachim, it is not a karmelis. He conditions it on the overhang, not on the beams. Okay. Especially the beams didn't help anything in the first place. Number 18. It just gives the source. Okay, let's just do 1 or 2 more laws. He says, Mutter litein lefnei ein Yehudi mezainis b'chatzer or b'bayis, alfa pi shedei she'yotzion lachutz. You're allowed to put food, mezainis is food, in your yard or your house, and give it to the Gentile, even though you know the Gentile's going to take it and walk outside. So you're kind of assisting this Gentile in taking something outside. You shouldn't put it in their hand, which we learned that's a problem because then you're doing the akira, and so he has to pick it up, which we did last week. So the Gentile has to pick, if you put it on the table or the floor, then the Gentile can pick it up. Let's say you put a soda can on the floor. Then if he picks it up and takes it outside, it's not a problem. But you can't hand him a cup of something for him to walk outside. The imkain, who oisa es akira, because if you pick it up and put it in their hands and you're doing there's 2 parts of moving something, which is in the first chapter of Shabbos. There's akira, picking it off the floor, and then you're putting it in the person's hand and he's walking out. So you're assisting in the carrying outside. That's only a situation if, he says, if the non-Jew can eat it in the house if he would like to. So he says that's only allowed if, let's say, you give a sandwich or a cup of coffee to a Gentile. So you're not holding him hostage. He can walk outside if he wants, but he also could stay inside and eat it if he wants. But if it's clear that he's not allowed to eat it, or he's not allowed to, it's too much food. There's no way he could eat it. So then it seems like you're literally giving him something to take outside, and that's not allowed. Because you're having the Gentile take something outside for you.
Why did you say mazonis? Because what if it was bread?
No. Over here, when he says mazonis, he means food, not.
Okay, but let me ask you. So all the time, we tell the guard of our shul to come in when we have kiddushes to take kiddush. to take the food and eat it, and sometimes he'll go back outside to watch the post.
But if he wants, he could eat it inside.
He could, but he sometimes goes
But,
outside.
but again, the outside that he goes to is in the Eruv.
Yeah, but what if there's not an Eruv? I'm asking.
Okay, if there's no Eruv and no, again, it's not that he has to eat it inside, it's just that he can. If it's too much food, if you're giving him a tray of 18 pieces of chicken, it's not possible. He's taking it home, that's a problem.
No, but we're giving. Sometimes he goes outside because he has to watch the post.
Okay, but he doesn't. He's doing his own time management.
Oh, okay.
Inside. Now, the problem is, for instance, we're coming up to the Goyish, some say pagan holiday of Halloween. Can you have a basket of candy on a Friday night, if Halloween to fall on Friday night, to have a basket of candy by your door, and have the kid put his hand in and take it out? In such a scenario, it's a problem because the kid is not allowed to eat it in your house. There's no way if the kid said, "I want to sit down and have the chocolate bar," now you say, "Sorry, it's not the game. That's not how Halloween works. You take it outside." So then it's a problem. I mean, to leave if you leave a basket outside the house, it's something else. But if they knock on the door and you have a basket inside the door, that's a problem. Even if you're not handing him the candy or her. Again, I'm just saying off the top of my mind, I'm not paskening, that's the law. I'm just saying from
what do you? I understand. Let me just ask you this. So some people tell me you shouldn't give because it's a Gorish holiday. Some people say if you don't give, they're going to egg your house. This is just mean people. They don't care if you're Jewish or not Jewish. They just want candy. So my question is, do you have, if you're in a city where they might egg your house? In New York, no one egging anybody. But like, where I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, that's what people used to say. But could you, or you got to follow the Shabbat thing?
You're asking questions that are not connected. The question of giving candy
I
is
understand the candy
is
thing.
a question during the week.
But I'm asking about on Shabbat. We all know that you can do it on not Shabbat. So this is not an issue. But on Shabbat, it's Friday. If your house doesn't have candy, they have the potential to egg it. To throw eggs at your house that you're gonna have to clean up.
I hear. Okay, I hear what you're saying. That if what I'm saying is correct, and I'm not sure it is, that to leave a basket of candy outside your house, inside your house on Halloween, and have them stick their hand and take it out and walk out, and there's no Eruv in the city, etc. And the reason why you want to do it is because you don't want to get your house egged. That wouldn't be a good enough reason to violate the Shabbos.
Okay, thank you.
If it was life-threatening, and back in Europe that was the case, Halloween was the time they killed Jews, and pogroms and all that. That's something different. Okay, so he says like this: as long as you do not put the food in his hands. This is the question that we're talking about right now. For if you do, you are doing the akira. Akira means the picking up. The Bach, Magen Avram, Tosfos, he's quoting the source for this, that you're not allowed to put it in their hands. The Eliyahu Rabbah argues that this applies only if the non-Jew is standing outside the yard. But that's again saying that that's the case of trick or treat, and his hand is inside the yard. Literally a case of trick or treat. But if he's standing inside the yard, or in the house, and then placing something in his hand is not an akira, because he does the akira when he moves his body. Akira means to be oker, to lift up something, to start the transfer of something. So everything that has to be transferred is to be picked up and put down. That's one of the rules of Shabbos. Now, if you put it in their hand and they're standing outside, so then you're beginning the transfer. But if he's standing inside and he's holding it, then he walks outside. So this is all part of the laws of Shabbos. The Masechta Shabbos talks about it. So when he moved his body, he picked it up, and so then you didn't do anything. You weren't involved. But that's only a case if the person's standing in the house. That's where the question is. The argument between the Eliyahu Rabbah and the Bach and the Magen Avram and the Tosfos. But if you're talking about a case of trick or treat, that's clearly, even the Eliyahu Rabbah would agree that's a problem. Unless you leave a basket for them to take. So he says, and he continues, if it's when it's obvious that he will carry it outside, it's forbidden. Why? If it is for a non-Jew who is ill, or if the non-Jew is a violent person, okay, this is your question of the eggs. you may place it in front of him and let him take it. So here, that would maybe be your basis for Shabbos giving trick or treat, leaving a basket inside the house for them to take. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the question of what's violent? Like I said, in Europe, that was what the case. They were beating up Jews on Halloween night. Today, no one's beating you up. You call the police. There's law and order. But egging your house could happen. If the question is if that's considered violence or not, I'm sure that's discussed by the rabbis. All right, let's stop here, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions on what we've said until now?
Oh, just to answer this, everything we're learning on Shabbos holds the laws for middle weeks of holidays when we had like Sukkot. I mean, not middle weeks, but for the actual holidays.
Say that again?
Okay. All the laws of Shabbos that we're learning now also holds for the holidays.
Depends. Some of them are connected to the holiday. Some of them are the laws of the Yom Tov are different.
But let's say for Sukkot that if the holiday's not on a Shabbos, it's in the middle weeks. We have to treat it like Shabbos, except for the cooking.
No, but the question of the keys is not a problem. All those things are not a problem. The problem is that what we spoke about today doesn't really come into the question of Yom Tov. It's really Shabbos questions.
Okay.
But again, yeah, I mean, these are things that they don't seem like they're part of our day-to-day life, but they very much are. Yes, Rebecca.
So just to confirm, actually, Aaron's question was a really good one. Just to confirm, like, there's no isser of carrying at all on Yom Tov as long as it's something you need for the Yom Tov?
Yeah. So to carry your keys and put your keys in the door and all that stuff, all the questions we talked about, stuff left out. Now again, Muksa still applies. Muksa actually starts the laws of Beitza, which really talk about the laws of Muksa. It's really Muksa is really put into the laws of Yom Tov more than Shabbos because there's so much things that's permissible. Shabbos is a lot of we don't do it. We don't cook on Shabbos. So Beitza should all be Yom Tov, right? What's the law? What's the Masach de Beitza? Beitza, the law. The question is that if an egg is born on Yom Tov. So in Shabbos, it's not really such a question because you can't cook an egg anyways on Shabbos. But on Yom Tov, you could cook eggs, and the egg was cooked it was hatched on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. So then is that considered muksa or not? That's what the questions go into. Because so Yom Tov creates more questions when it comes to muksa because of the things that are permissible. Shabbos is less of a question because anyways you can't do anything about it. But the questions of touching the papers or the mail, that's equal to Yom Tov and Shabbos. If the problem is muksa.
But like carrying from like a public domain to a private domain and like walking a really long distance outside the tchum, like those kinds of things.
No. Tchum is Yom Tov is also.
Oh,
Tchum is
really?
no. Tchum is a problem with Yom Tov. The question is again, Westchester and these places are not. You have to find the halachic. We don't know how these things work exactly. You could have someone living somewhere. You could have. There's a lot of ways of breaking the separation. It's not so difficult to break the separation. It's very hard to find today in civilized world, in normal places, in residential areas, places that you can't walk.
Someone told me that all 5 boroughs you can walk on Shabbos if you can walk that distance. The reason being is that it's all houses and people live there and there's no empty land.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, but there are still like a problem. Like, I know that, for instance, people walk from Hadassah Hospital into town. Hadassah Hospital in Israel, in Jerusalem, it's pretty far out there. I mean, it's like, there's a good space where it seems like no one lives until the hospital. I would imagine that's more than 2,000 amas. But people do it all the time. I'm not sure. So there's obviously, I'm not sure how they've worked it out to allow for that. Maybe they put an air of tchumim there. I don't know what they did, but it seems pretty far. But most places don't have that kind of distance unless you live out like if you live out in America, in the Midwest, and any places that's in even upstate New York, it becomes a question. But if you're living in residential areas, in suburbia, it's less likely to find that issue. So
Okay.
I find it hard to believe that there's not a way to walk into Westchester from New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's more suburbia. It's not. I mean, it's more residential. It's city. It's not. All right, everyone. Laila Tov, thank you very much again. This is a post Yom Tov class. I know Yom Tov was finished today, so everyone's still tired. Barbara wasn't. I figured it was after 8 o'clock in Seattle. Yom Tov was out, I think 7 or 6:30. So there was time for everyone, even on the West Coast, to join. But it was, of course, the holiday, etc. Laila Tov, everyone, take care.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.